Request as best I can. But I would like to say one thing, and that is that very recently Kung donated some of his artwork for sale, and the proceeds of which went to the genetics department from the James Crow Institute. And I hope you all got a chance to see his art. It is magnificent. He is has a tremendous artistic talent, and I really appreciate that donation to our department. And I think that just really says a lot about the type of person that Kung is.
That's a speech.
Sorry, that's not a speech. Harry gives a speech.
Nobody took my lines.
So I'm not going to take them out of the envelope. These are two certificates, one from Chancellor Blank and the other from Governor Walker. Thank you. Sorry.
You can bend over it.
Yeah, you know.
Frame it.
Thank you for your years of service.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. And I'll turn it over to Barry.
Barry promised to embarrass.
I made no such agreement not to give speeches. I made no such agreement, so I'm free to say whatever I want. And as I told Kung, if he's not happy with it, he can give my speech in just a few months. Yeah, so why I am chosen to have the privilege of saying a few words on behalf of my esteemed colleague, Professor Kung. I think it's just a way of saying I'm the next oldest guy on the block. And so even though I know Kung hates to be the center of attention and hates to be in the limelight, I figure we have just one Kung, and assuming he's not Brett Favre, he will have only one retirement. So he has to indulge us this opportunity to pay a little bit of tribute to him for what he's been to the department as a member for 41 years. And I've overlapped with him all those years except for 5. So I've known Professor Kung for a very long time. The story of how he came here was before my time. We recruited him very wisely in 1974 from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Why he came from Santa Barbara to Madison, I just learned. I inquired what was the reason for that, and it makes sense. He said it was temporary insanity. Temporary insanity that has now lasted for 41 years. So there are many things to say about Professor Kung. I'll stop calling him Professor. Just refer to him as I've always known him, as Kung, as he refers to himself. This is somebody who has truly achieved rock star status, right? Like Elvis or Madonna. Kung. Everybody knows it's Kung. And as I was trying to think about what I was going to say, I recalled some lines that were attributed to Winston Churchill about one of his political opponents. And somebody commented that this opponent was a very modest man. And Churchill replied, "That's good, because he has very much to be modest about." Kung is exactly the opposite. Here's a man who always retires from the limelight, is as modest as can possibly be. And he has absolutely nothing to be modest about as a scientist, and as we've heard, as an artist, and not just an artist, but poet and philosopher, teacher, and departmental colleague. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on his research, except to point out that Kung is one of the true original thinkers. Creative, fundamental, and seminal in his contributions in several different areas. And I can say this not only as a faculty colleague, but as somebody who was directly influenced in his own research by what Kung did. The work, first of all, in paramecium, isolating behavioral mutants with paramecium, and combining genetics with electrophysiology. in a microorganism. Among the first few who ever thought of combining electrophysiology and genetics. In this case, to isolate mutants affecting membrane excitability. That work was extraordinarily successful. I won't spend much time talking about that work. It's all published. You can take a look at it, but it certainly influenced me. I was aware of Kung before I ever met him because that was a direct inspiration for the work I did as a postdoc, which was essentially the same thing, to try to isolate these kinds of mutants, except in Drosophila. But Kung was also original in even thinking about the use of microorganisms as an appropriate system for studying neurobiological problems, and moved on from paramecium to other microorganisms, yeast, and even bacteria. And in the course of doing electrophysiological studies on yeast and bacteria, discovered in the membrane of E. coli an organism that was inappropriate for studies of the brain, discovered the mechanosensitive channels of E. coli. These are channels that are gated, open, and closed in response to pressure in the membrane. And from the purification and reconstitution of those channels, was able to demonstrate that these channels are directly gated, directly activated by forces that operate within the lipid bilayer, in the absence of any other protein attachments, in the absence of cytoskeleton. This is a fundamental principle now known as the force from lipid principle that applies not only for the gating of these channels in E. coli, but for the gating of channels that have very similar properties in all systems, including humans. The operation of these channels turns out to be absolutely fundamental to senses such as hearing, touch, sense of gravity, our ability to sense the position of our limbs, how our bodies respond to different kinds of forces for growth, not just in animals, but also plants. All this related back to what is probably the most primordial forces operating on the original cells living in an aqueous environment and how they respond to osmotic pressure. This is actually most fundamental principles and certainly now widely recognized. And as many of you know, the acclaims are there. Kung has been recipient of a Worf professorship, the Vilas professorship, the Hilldale Award, election to National Academy. So, and the papers, if you take the time to read them, are absolutely beautiful. If you didn't already know that Kung was an artist, poet, and philosopher, you would see it in the publications. How the work is presented, how he thinks about it, and the artistry with which the whole story is presented. I've also had the opportunity to be a teacher with Kung. We co-taught Genetics 466 for many years, and at least in the early days, we sat in on each other's lectures. And I can't speak for the students, but speaking for myself, I can say that it was such a pleasure to listen to his lectures, the deep insights, the original ideas, as always, and the sly sense of humor with which things were always presented. So it was always entertaining and educational for me. And I really enjoyed those years that we co-taught the course. And another way that some of you may have experienced Kung's truly original way of thinking about things, you only have to go to a seminar that he attends and listen to the questions that he asks after the seminar. The deep insight and the perception and the different way of thinking about things that characterizes his approach to science. Without insulting any of the seminar speakers, I would say that in many cases, Kung's perceptive questions at the end were a whole lot more interesting and thought-provoking than the seminar. It's true. And as a faculty colleague, and here I can speak very personally because one of the reasons I came to Wisconsin was because Kung was here. and because I wanted to be able to do the work in neurogenetics in a place where they could appreciate it and understand it. And in those days, there were precious few individuals who understood both electrophysiology and genetics. And in those days, we didn't have faculty mentoring committees for the junior faculty, so we had to seek our own mentors, and one of the ones I sought was Kung. He probably doesn't even remember, but there were many times I consulted him for advice, suggestions, help when we were running into problems with our research on interpret things. He was always available, and he always gave me profound advice. I won't embarrass him by going through some of those things, but I learned many important lessons that were of value to me throughout the years as a faculty member, for which I have always been grateful. At faculty meetings, I think of Kung also as sort of conscience, part of the conscience of the department. I don't know how many times there have been situations where there's endless debate about one issue or another. As we discuss and debate and back and forth, and Kung just puts an end to it by summarizing the situation, both the problem and the solution, in one pithy insight, and say, whatever that particular thing, he'll just nail it. And everybody looks around and says, he's right. So I think it's customary upon retirement to wish the retiree well, and I certainly wish Kung well, but I also wish the department well. It's going to be a very different place in the absence of Kung. I hope the kind of example he has set and the kind of inspiration he has provided to all of us lives on. And as John has already pointed out, Kung is such a generous colleague to donate his absolutely fantastic paintings to contribute to the department and the pro-professorship. Now that Kung is going to have a whole lot of free time as a retiree, I hope he continues to spend a lot of time painting so he can continue to generate income from it. And I thank you personally and on behalf of my colleagues for everything you have done for me personally and done for the department for 41 years.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Barry.
Now we have Al actually to present it to.
Oh, well, let Kung at least say thank you.
Al. I actually don't have anything sincere or not to say, except to say that I'm old and it's time to retire and I quit. That's it.
And now Al will present Kung with a gift from the department.
Well, we're very happy to present you with a strategic gift in the interest of future donations to the department. This is a gift certificate for art supplies. We hope you don't quit.
So it's a gift card from Dick Lick happened to be my favorite art supply house. Thank you very much.
From all together.